So we have a 1915 40 horsepower case owned by David France and family. It's a nice looking steam engine. There it goes. One of my favorite things. Here we have an Eclipse Frick steam engine. It's a 1915 7.5 by 9 Eclipse, 12 to 36 horsepower, and it is owned by the Supers family. I love those whistles.
How are you doing?
Fine. Here we got a big one coming.
You got a number in?
Yeah. This is another Frick Eclipse.
I had the setup you got. Is that mini DV or digital?
Digital.
Digital.
Okay, it's on the other side. It's a 1923 Frick steam traction engine, 7x10 double cylinder, 60 horsepower. And it's owned by Tim Bear and family. These speakers just don't like me. Here we got a Russell steam engine. It's a 13 horsepower. And it's a 1901, and it's owned by the Bisecker family. And here we have a Peerless S, owned by Jesse Byers. Oh, here's another big one. It's another Russell. It's a 1920 Russell 2060, and it's owned by Jim and Tammy Floor. You're welcome. Thank you. They could blow them all day, but I know they can't. Here comes a nice big case. It's a Cherry 6. Oh, it's Jerry 65 case. Thank you. And as I said yesterday, maybe one of these days I'll take Mr. Jerry's steam engine class. Here we have a Gar Scott 13 horsepower. It was manufactured in 1913, owned by Mr. Jerry Lookaball. Here we have a 30 horsepower case built in 1912, owned by Mr. Jerry. Here we have another case. It was built in 1916. Owned by the Cap family in memory of Herb and Marion. And again, folks, like I've said multiple times, these engines are over 100 years old and they operate just as good as they would have when they were 10 years old or a year old. I mean, it's just amazing. Here we got another big one. It's a 2390 1925 Baker. Rough and tumble. Like I said, I could listen to that all day long, but they have to run the steam first. Here we got another nice big case. It's owned by the Burke family. It's a 1916 case 65. And here we got our first tractor coming. It's a McCormick Deering. A McCormick Deering 1020 owned by Jacob Shaver. And again, we're going to see a lot of Farmalls because that is our feature tractor this year. Here we got another McCormick Deering Farmall. It's a 1944 a Farmall H owned by Michael Bruner. Here we got a Farmall MD diesel. It is a 1951 model. It's called Big Red, and it's owned by Pat and Nancy Stickles. Trying to say too much at once. Here's another McCormick Farmall H, 1945, owned by Allison Yingling. Here we got a Farmall 560, owned by Gary Snyder. It's a 1962 model. Here we got another one owned by Gary Snyder. It's a 1950 Farmall Super C. This is owned by Richard Utt. It's an International 284 diesel. Here we got a big one. We got a 756 International. It's a 1969 model, and it's owned by the Leicesterdale Farm. That's in memory of, and it was painted by Tim Lair. Here we got another International 2404. It's a 1967 model owned by Witter. Here we got a little International Lawnmower 982 Cub Cadet. It's a 1981 model owned by Paul Free and Jody Aberts. Hi, little buddy. Here we got another big one. This is a Massey Ferguson. It's a 1968 Massey Ferguson 1130. And it's owned by Louis Stoms Jr. Here comes an Olive Chandler. It's owned by Cody Lookable, and it's a WS Alice. Here we got Junior. So on the small trailer, it's a Caterpillar dozer, and this is a Magnatrack Junior. Here we have a Wheel Horse GT14. Here we have a McCormick Deering Standard. It is a W4 Farmall, owned by Brienne Lookable. And here we have a Massey Ferguson lawnmower owned by Jeff Giles. It's a Massey Ferguson 10, and he's pulling his daughter in her little fire truck. Here it looks like we got somebody learning. Nothing wrong with that. Got to start somewhere. We have a Power King owned by Madison Myers. It's a 1981 2414. Here we got a Farmall M. 1951, owned by Justin Langford. Here we have a 1952 McCormick Deering W4, owned by the Langford family. Here we have another McCormick Deering Standard. It's a W6, and it's also owned by the Langford family. Here comes a Caterpillar crawler. It has a diesel engine, of course. I wouldn't expect anything different. It is a D2 owned by Justin Langford. Here we got an 806 Farmall coming. It's a diesel. And it's owned by Eric Lookable, and it's a 1967 806. Here comes an Alice Chalmers, owned by Jordan Barlow, and it's a 1954 Alice WD-45. And here comes a 1953 Farmall Super M, owned by Hunter. I still didn't get that. I'm sorry. Here, I'll let you say. Hunter Pomeranian. I was afraid to butcher it, so I didn't want to say it. Here we got a Farmall Super H. And it's owned by Ethan Pomeranian. Here we got another Farmall H. It's a 1939 model, and it's owned by Carl Hutchins. Here we got a John Deere coming. It's a John Deere Model BR. It's a 1940, and it's owned by the Graff Family Collection. Here's a John Deere G, a 1950, also owned by the Graff Family Collection. Here we got a Farmall H. It's a 1949 model owned by Grayson Merritt. Oh. 7. So here we got a John Deere lawnmower. It's a John Deere 140, and the engine he's pulling is a 7 horsepower economy owned by Case Schubert. Here we got another Farmall 8, 1947 model, owned by James Wetzel Jr. Here comes a 530 John Deere. This is also owned by the Graff Family Collection, and it is a 1960 model. Here we have an Alice Chandler 1953 WD-45 owned by Roger Hackler. Here comes another John Deere. It's a 1941D owned by Daniel Dell. And another John Deere. It's a 1941 John Deere H owned by Wyatt Dell. Here we have a John Deere A 1950 owned by Daniel Dell. And here comes the green I'm partial to. It's an Oliver 77 row crop. It is owned by Janet and Ryan Billings. Ralph Billings, I'm sorry. And it's just an Oliver row crop 77. What year? I think instead of 51. This is a Minneapolis Moline. I haven't seen too many of them here this year. It's a R model. And it's owned by Olivia Harvey, and it's a 1940. Here we got a Farmall MTA Super MTA torque amplifier. It is owned by the Wealthy family. It's a 1954 model. Here we got a Farmall 560 owned by the Wealthy family. Here we have a John Deere. It's a 1940L model owned by Phil Hartline. And it's got a sickle bar attached to it, sickle bar mower attached to it. Here comes another Farmall MD owned by Doug Sullivan. Here we got another little John Deere. It's a Model L as well, and it's owned by Hannah and Jeremy Williams. Have a nice big Caterpillar coming. I didn't see it in yesterday's parade, but I do recognize it from previous years. It's owned by the Barnes family. It's a Caterpillar Model 60, and it's a 1929. And what he's towing behind him is the Showdown. whatever you put in it, it comes out from the bottom. Here comes a big old Caterpillar dozer. It's owned by Bob Stickles, and it's a Cat D6, and it's a 1946 model. And behind him we got a 22 Caterpillar, owned by Bob Stickles, and it's a 1927 model. Here we got a Caterpillar 1929-20, owned by Josh Carr. It's an Army Ordnance tractor for guns and ammo carts. Very interesting. Thank you.
I know, right?
Here we got an 806 Farmall. Owned by the Burnett family, and it's an International 806 Turbo. Here we got a Farmall F12. It's a 1926 model, owned by Wyatt Snyder. We got another Farmall. It's a Farmall M, owned by Tyler Ayers.
Sorry.
Oh, that looks like an M. I'm sorry. It's an H. My bad. It's a Farmall H. Here we have another Moline. It's a 1947 Model Z Minneapolis Moline, and owned by Wes and Jerry Johnson. Here we have a Massey Harris Pony. It is owned by the Johnson family. Here we have another Massey Harris coming up. It's a 1956 model 555, owned by Wes and Jerry Johnson. Here we have another Massey Harris. It's a 101 Junior, owned by Wes and Jerry Johnson. This looks like it's a John Deere dozer, and it says it's a 420C Crowder loader made by John Deere, and it's a 1957 model, and its operator is Levi Rohrball. And we have another Farmall, owned by the Ayers family. It's a Farmall H, 1949 model. And another Farmall. It's a Farmall F20. It's a 1939 model, owned by Glenn Snyder. A 450 Farmall. 1956 model, owned by Wade Snyder. And we got another Farmall coming. It's a 1948 Farmall M, owned by Jared and Shelley Keeney. This looks like a little Farmall Cub. Not sure though. It's a Farmall A. It's a 1945, and it's owned by Jared and Shelley Keeney. Here we have a 318 John Deere lawnmower, owned by Jared and Shelley Keeney. And here we have a Case 2545, 1929 model, contractors heavy-duty wheels on it, owned by the Barnes family. And here comes probably about one of the biggest John Deeres you could probably own. It's a John Deere 7520. And I did see it go in the pool last night. It's a 1974 model owned by John Zumbrin. And behind him we have a 530 John Deere. Owned by Corinne Mummer, and it's a John Deere 530. And it has power steering on it. And like I said, I love seeing the ladies on the tractors and driving them and owning them. Here we have an Alice Chandler B. It's a 1944 model owned by Glenn and Tammy Blucher. Blucher. Thought I'd remember it, but I didn't. Here we got an Alice Chandler 1949G owned by Randy Pickett. And it's got a set of cultivators attached to it. And here we have Mr. Danny Graff coming.
25 Titan, owned by Bill and McGrew.
It's a 25 Titan, but I missed who he said it was owned by. Here we got a McCormick W9 Standard, owned by Gary Snyder. It's a 1950 model. Oh, that's right. This is the plaque tractor. So if you are a member and got a plaque, that is the tractor that is on the plaque. So here we have a John Deere B coming through, owned by John Price, and it's a 1951 model. Here we have Farmall H. It's a 1948 Farmall H, owned by Cody Schofield. Here we have a Farmall H. Looks like it's got a corn planter attached to it. It's owned by Jacob Raleigh, and it is a 1947 Farmall H. It's nicknamed Annie, and it is a full-time farm tractor. Here we got a John Deere owned by Tim and Kim. Repogel? I butchered it. Whatever it is. It's a John Deere B. Here we got an Oliver. It's an Oliver 70. It's a 1946 model, owned by Farm at 1920. Here we got a Cub Cadet lawnmower. It's a 1990 model, owned by Connor Morrison. Can't say that I've seen this one. This is a Farmall. It's owned by Grayson Merritt, and it's a 1940 Farmall A. Oops, your tag fell off. Here we got an Alice Chandler with a blade on it. Somebody must be ready for winter to push snow. Is that right? Okay, so this is owned by Fred Lookable, and it's Alice WC maintainer. Here we got a Farmall A, Super A. It is a, doesn't tell me the year, but it's owned by Collins Spangler. Sometimes the writing gets me and sometimes it's the pronunciation. This is a John Deere Diesel R. It's all the tags on that side. It's a 1952 model owned by the Langford family. Here we have a 1931 GP. It's a John Deere and it's owned by Dave Cole. And the GP stands for General Purpose. Here we got a 420 John Deere lawnmower. Looks like you guys are having a lot of fun. Oh, your tag's down there? It's owned by Dustin Almoni, and it's a 1988 John Deere 420. Here we have another dozer. It is a 1957 420 John Deere. It's a 420C owned by Joshua Deschamps. Here we have a Farmall Cub. It's owned by Peter Lincecum and it's a 1947 Farmall Cub. Here we got a Farmall 460 diesel owned by Travis Smith. And that's his beautiful wife Paige riding with him. And here comes one that I'm a little prone to. This is my son, Bradley Harris. It's the Oliver 77. There he is. There's Waylon driving with him. Here we have a McCormick Farmall BN. It is owned by Evan Graham. And he's another person I'm a little partial to. He's about to be a daddy. Could be any day. Here we have a 1980 International 584 owned by Howard Smith. Here we have a Ford, so it's the same Farmall one to come out. It's an 1948 8N Ford owned by Michael Smith. My grandfather used to have two little 8Ns. Hi there. Here we have a Farmall H, and it's owned by Howard Smith, and that's a 1941 Farmall H. Here we have a 1940 Farmall H owned by Heath Wilhelm. Here we have a John Deere 110 lawnmower owned by Heath Wilhelm. Here comes another one I'm a little partial to. This is my nephew's dad. It is a Oliver 1955. It's a 1970 model, and it's owned by Mark Bixler, Bixler Valley Farms. And here comes an Oliver 1850, also owned by Mark Bixler, Bixler Valley Farms. And it is a 1965 Oliver 1850 with the cab. Here we have a Simplicity 7790 diesel lawnmower owned by John Malley Sr. Here we have a Farmall Cub. It's a 1949 Farmall Cub owned by the Ayers family. This John Deere is owned by Helena Alimony, and it's a 1940 John Deere H. Here comes another John Deere owned by Daniel Dell, and it's a 1949 John Deere M. And this one is owned by Daniel Dell, the 1939 John Deere L. Here comes another John Deere, 1954 model owned by Daniel Dell. Here comes another one of my favorites. So this is an Oliver 770. And it's a 1964, and it's owned by Sarah Bixler. And here comes another one on my favorites that I'm a little partial to. It's an Oliver 1550. It's owned by my nephew, Sterling Bixler, and it's a 1966 Oliver 1550. Here we have a Farmall 400, owned by John Black. Here we have a International Cub. It is a 1975 International Cub owned by Debbie Brown. Here we have a Rumley oil pull coming. It is a 1928 Rumley model 2030W owned by the Barnes family. This is an International 816 kerosene tractor. So that means it runs off of kerosene and not gasoline. It is owned by the Burke family, and it is a 1921 model. Here comes a John Deere B, owned by Paul Cole, and it's a 1946 John Deere B. Here we got an International 656 with Hydra shift, and it is a 1971 model owned by the Burke family. Here we got a little Alice Chalmers lawnmower coming. It's a B110, owned by Randy Beckett. Okay. Up next, we have another one learning. Got to start somewhere. Jacob Beckett out of Tawnytown. And he's on a Lowe's lawnmower. Gotta turn this way a little bit. There you go. Gotta watch the road. Here we got an International. It's a tractor. It's a 1937 International Harvester T4 owned by Josh Barnes. Sorry. have a Massey Harris 44. It's a 1954 model owned by Wes and Jerry Johnson. And they're the gentlemen that's been kindly watering the roads to keep the dust down. Thank you, gentlemen. Here we got a John Deere. A 1939 John Deere L owned by Ben Adams. Here we have a Farmall 460. It is owned by Jacob Raleigh, and it's a 1960 Farmall 460, and it's named the Red Liner. Here we got an Alice Chalmer on steel. It is owned by the Barnes family, and it is a Model E 1936. Here we got a Moline on steel. It's a Moline Universal 1920 Model D owned by the Barnes family. And last but not least, we have another little Farmall. And this is a 1949 Farmall Super A, and it's owned by the Ayers family. And now I need to make an announcement because we need some cars moved. We have a Mazda with PA tag YXY0858.